Okay, students, I'm going to show you how to use the materials, which are watercolor pencils and watercolor cakes. These are called cakes. The watercolor pencils are actually not colored pencils. They are watercolor paint that is in the form of a pencil. And I'm going to start by showing you a couple of different techniques when you're using it. So, one is if you wet your paper first, you don't want to saturate or soak the paper because then it's going to start getting all crumbly. But if your paper is wet and then you go over it, you can make very dark lines because the watercolor is breaking up into the paper. And then you can move that color around so you have some tone. And you can see that light pink. But then you may want to work, this spot is dry. If you put the color down first, you don't have to press super hard. If you decide to do a dark line and then take your water, you can create all different values of that red. Now that red may be too bright and you want to tone it down. So then we have to go to the color wheel, and we have to remember that the opposite of red, or the complement of red, is green. So maybe you need to put a little bit of green in there. Now if you're using the pencil, you just put a light amount in and then use the water to move it around and blend it, or you take from the cakes, add a little bit of green to your brush, and you can tone it down. Now you can always pull up some water by using a rag or paper towel. You may even want to combine the cakes and the brush. So if you're trying to get a red that's not too red, that's not super bright and popping out at you, you just need to mix it with its complement to tone it down. Now, the other thing you want is we're not going to fill in a shape and then color it. For example, we're not going to take a shape we have drawn, take a color, violet, color it in, and then take the water to it, because then you're just going to have flat color. Instead, what you want to do is, if this is your shape, maybe put some of the color down in some areas, lighten it in a little bit other areas, then take your water and move it around. Then you have some different tones. I'm going to pull some of that color up and move it around so you have some variation. You don't want it to all be the same. We're not coloring in a coloring book. We are painting. So if I use purple and I need to make some of that purple not so bright, I'm going to take yellow from the cakes. I'm going to put in just a little bit of yellow. Just a little bit of yellow takes away some of that huge, huge, huge brightness. Then the areas that are purple will pop out. Now when you're doing big background areas, so that's some example, but when you're doing some big background areas, and I'm going to use my example here, you're not going to use a brush like this. You're going to need a bigger brush for bigger areas. Maybe not that big, maybe this big. So I have already started putting in some green. Now, if you want the paint to move, you need to have it wet enough that you're not working dry, which is the paper, with dry paint. You want to put wet onto dry. Now, if you can see, I'm not filling in the space, but I'm letting the paint actually go over some other areas. Maybe I take another color, like one of the blues, and I put it over the watercolor. The fun thing about watercolor is you can create so many variations of your color by just layering it on top. So maybe in another spot I'm going to use a little bit of yellow, because yellow and blue make green. So now my negative space, although it's still negative space, has some variation of color, so it now takes on a whole new dimension in the painting. Okay, so now I want to show you how you work line work on top of your color. If you've put in color in an area and you want to have the drawing show up on top, but you don't want all the watercolor pencil to get smudged around it, you're going to let it dry because it's wet right now, and then you can go back in with your colored pencil and draw your line. So if you have a tennis racket, this is a good space that you would go in and draw your tennis racket lines over after you've put the color in. Or you have a basketball and you've colored the whole area. Here's a basketball. Well, now I need to come in and put in those lines because I've already painted it. Now, I don't necessarily need to outline it, but if you want to, you can. I'm just going to outline part of it and show you what I'm going to do. So now I've put that in, but I still want to add a little bit more dimension to it. I don't want those lines to just be straight lines. So now I'm going to take a little bit of water, go over my line, and sort of blend it. So now my line has a more painted look than just a drawn look. And I'm going to show you an example. So there's my basketball. I'm going to show you an example of somebody who did a soccer ball, and the soccer ball is white, or maybe it's a volleyball. I'm not sure. Remember what I said about sports in May. They put in the black line, and then they took a little bit of water around the black line, and it gave the line a little bit of dimension. And it made that ball pop just a little bit more than just being flat. So that's another way you can work it. If you can see here, I created the flame. I put the red in, but then I sort of let the water take some of the color and move it around. That is some of the things that you need to do. If you use too much water, you're going to end up getting, the paper's going to end up pilling or bubbling up, and you don't want that. So you want to be careful how hard you're rubbing the paintbrush onto the paper and how much water you are using. At the same time, you need enough water to move your paint around. What else? What else can I tell you? Mixing colors. We can go over that in class, but again, you just refer back to your color wheel and you will see how to make your complementary colors so you can tone things down. You're using the white of the paper to create some lighter tones. The heavier the paint that you put down, the darker the color will be. Whereas if you leave, this is black, but because I let so much of the white paper come through, it's actually more gray. And you're also going to build up as you're putting color down. You can add more as you go along. It doesn't all have to be put down in one flat color. I'm going to show you an example of this Facebook. I don't know if you can see it, but she has a little bit of tone in there. It's not just a flat image of Facebook. Here is a Georgia peach. So this Georgia peach has some tone in it. It's because the color was put down and then it let the water pull it around. Here's a good example of some yellow. It's darker down here. It gets lighter as we go up, but it's intense because nothing was added to it. Where in here, a little bit of purple was added to dull it down a little bit. Now you can see what happens to the paper when you have too much water and it starts pulling the paper up. So you need to be careful. That also has to do with how much you're pressing the paintbrush into your paper. And I think that will get us all started using watercolor pencils and the watercolor cakes, and you're going to combine it. You can let the pencil mark be part of it. You can go over the pencil mark with colored pencils or watercolor pencils, but that happens after. You need to lay in your back color first, and then the things that go on top of it.